1840. He comes over here and he says, you know, when I get close to the shore, I'm paraphrasing. He says, there's a clamor, a great noise. There is. People are shouting. That's true. What are they doing? They're arguing. That's what they're doing. They're arguing. They're debating. We get something new, like privacy. Try privacy today, when computers have a memory that doesn't forgive or forget. Compare the law on that with the facts today. How do we decide these things? Well, you see everybody screaming. You see meetings. You see the ACLU saying one thing. You see the Sheriff's Association saying another. You see newspaper editorials and law review articles, and everybody has an opinion. Fine, I used to think it was too bad on the Supreme Court when everybody didn't agree with me. I learned this is a big country. Not so terrible that the people have different points of view. So they argue, they debate in city halls, they argue in school classes. You too, you get in the argument. That's excellent. You have people with different points of view trying local ordinances, perhaps an administrative ruling. Maybe Congress has some hearings. Maybe you get some of your agencies to do something. It doesn't work too well. They try it again. They pass it again. They change it, and all that goes on. It is a huge mess. But eventually, they end up with something in those laws, and then we work best when we come in last. And our job with this document is not to say whether what everybody else decided is right or wrong. It is to say whether it falls within the boundaries that these are written in that document. Because that's what the document sets. There are boundary conditions. And I say to people, you know, I used to listen to this radio program called Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. There are fewer and fewer people who used to hide under the covers in 1952, and parents couldn't hear it and listen to the radio. And Sergeant Preston of the Yukon was out there at the border in Canada. Life was tough. It was cold. Decisions were hard. Is abortion in or out? What about prayer in schools? Within the boundaries of what is permitted or not? Difficult questions on which people can have two opinions, opposite. We'll decide them, because that's our job. All right? But what people forget is in between those boundaries, there is a vast, vast space within which this document gives everybody else the power and the right to decide. And nobody says they're outside the boundary. And that's what we have debates about. That's what we argue about. That's how I think Tocqueville described what we do. And my guess is that even with these difficult things you're talking about, that kind of process, or something roughly like it, is what will take place.
Now, wait a minute. The follow-up to that is, if you watch Sergeant Preston, then he's most certainly watched.
I didn't watch Sergeant Preston.
Then he watched Howdy Doody. And as a on the boundary.
Yeah, Howdy Doody came along, but you see, that was after 3 years in San Francisco, having to turn on the television set and look at the test pattern.
The ambassador of the Netherlands. I think you have a question.
Okay.
Henny.
Well, first of all, thank you for organizing this. Thank you for your 25 years of existence. I have a question also to Justice Breyer. I want to go back to your example. The Thai boy who sees basically maybe probably a business opportunity. You get to decide the case, you get all the briefs from Thailand, from Europe, and whatever. Now, what I'm interested is, what did you do with the briefs? What was the outcome? Did you take into account, and would you ever say, okay, you know what, this Thai boy might be wrong in my country, but is right in his country, and it would be unfair to judge him according to standards that are not his? And I have a follow-up question on that. Is it not more logical that if that might be true, and you say it's much more international now than it used to be, and your rulings have much broader effect internationally, how often do you, or does the Supreme Court, for instance, talks to the European Court and say, well, you know what, this is our doctrine, how does that mesh with European doctrine, or how does it mesh with doctrine in Japan, or maybe China, etc.? What are your international contacts?
They grow, and we were probably a year and a half ago over in Luxembourg. I've been in the court. It's a lovely court, actually, in Amsterdam. we're having the members of the Luxembourg court here next spring. Several of us went over and had talked to the Brits who were last year in September. So there's quite a lot. The members of the Mexican court came, and we had members of the Indian court. But I mean, I don't spend all my time, doing what you do. There's a limited amount of time you can do this, and I think it's helpful. But there are other ways of finding out. I mean, in the Netherlands, we had a really tough case on when a treaty becomes internal law, and my God, I spent hours on that trying to figure that one out, going back to. And lo and behold, I'm at one of these meetings afterwards, unfortunately, and the Justice Minister of the Netherlands gets up, and by some amazing fluke that was relevant, he explained how they did it in the Netherlands. That was it. That was exactly what I had spent an awful lot of time working on. I wish I'd known that before. But the people who will try to figure out what's relevant, present it to us, and then try to get our decision to work in this world are called lawyers. And we don't know how to look everything up, nor do they. But we have a three-part profession: judges, lawyers, and law schools. And the law schools have to teach the students how to bring into account law and practices in other areas, so that the lawyers will know how to look those things up, so that then they can present it to us, so that we can write an opinion based on what they say, pretty much. And then when we write the opinion, the law professors write articles about how wrong we are. and that way, the law develops, because they'll read the articles, they will get to the next case, etc. It develops that way. On your first question, I'll make one brief comment. I think there's been a change. There's a word in the law, which those of you who are lawyers probably know when you talk about international law. It's called comity. Comity, which is pretty obscure, used to mean don't have a law in your country where you interpret it in a way that interferes with other places. I think that word, in my opinion, has more and more come to mean when you have an antitrust case, when you have a case involving what maybe human rights, the Alien Tort Statute, whatever it is, try in your decision to create a rule of law that will harmonize the bodies, law-related bodies, in different countries that have similar problems. And I can give you lots of examples, but I won't. I mean, that I think happens again and again and again. And it is a force. It is not a philosophy of a judge. It is a force that works towards harmonization. And it's there. It's there. By the way, the student won his case.
We have a distinguished guest that just came in, Judge William Webster. Come on in, Judge. And I'm
trying
so
to
happy to
help the
have
judges.
you. Yeah, we got a chair especially for you. Thank you for coming. Sit right over here. Okay. And so now let's have a...
Good to see you.
Amazing. You met the oh my God. So now let's have a question, John Farmer, for Megan, okay?
Sure, absolutely. So Megan, diversity is something that you focus a lot on, diversity in STEM and technical fields. What have you seen as the most effective approaches that are happening in society today? And the second part is, when do you think we can actually get to a place where we have a substantially diverse tech sector?
Yeah, so a couple different things. Actually focus on three areas. One is, how do we diversify the tech sector? And I'll talk about that in a second. How do we techify everything else? Because those sectors are very diverse, and so how can we use these tools there? Because that will inherently be diverse. And also, how do we work on what we see, who we see doing what? So when we watch TV, for example, when you guys watch TV, no one knows that children's and families television, for example, computer science, 15-to-1, boy programmers to girl programmers. And so Hollywood doesn't really realize they're doing this, but they're sort of propagandizing the kids to think only one group does this, when it's just come to them. So we've been working on a project called Images STEM, which is who's been seen, and it helped the area of law, with LA law, forensics, that you see, who do you see doing what profession, which is a big challenge. One of the areas that we just published on the OSTP blog on Monday was a list of the we call it raise the floor. The minimum practices everybody should be doing if you're leading an organization, if you're working on advancement and retention, no matter where you are in the organization, minimum practices on hiring pipeline, and on sort of ecosystem, what all of us can do together. And it's astonishing when you look at that list and see how many organizations, that's what we call raise the floor, don't do all those practices. They'll ask you, well, where would I find people like this? Or people are just unaware of the things you could do to make a big difference. These are hundreds of years of challenge around racism and sexism, and we have a search on for the Declaration of Sentiments. Who knows what the Declaration of Sentiments is? It's amazing, a couple of people. This is a document that was written in Seneca Falls at the first ever Women's Rights Convention. It's the most comprehensive document I've ever read on women's equality. It was ratified, signed 2/3 by women, 1/3 by men. Frederick Douglass, thankfully, was one of the signers, and he took it and he published it in the Northern Star. And so we have the content, but the document itself, like most of women's history, is missing. And so we've been looking for it, but I bring that up because it talks about in there about fair pay. It talks about access to professions. In there they mention law and medicine, but we would say tech and finance today. And it talks about confidence at the end, like seeking to destroy confidence. And so really encourage you to read that. But there's some basic practices that we could change about kind of the style compliance we have and how we require people to be at work. That would really make a big difference. So I just encourage everyone to get a hold of this grid that we put up there and work it in your organizations. It's exciting to see some of the changes. For example, this week we announced there's $800 million of early stage money from 30 different companies, 30 different organizations that invest, who are now going to really shift their early stage money to a much more diverse set of entrepreneurs. I mean, only 1% of venture goes to African American founders, less than 3% to women founders. Most of venture goes to 3 regions in our country, so to Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. So we really have to diversify to make sure that the opportunities are there. And so we're working on these issues, but we could move faster. And so those are some of the things that we're working on. I wanted to mention that President gave the Medal of Freedom earlier on Tuesday last week. And last year he gave it to Katherine Johnson. How many people in here have ever heard of Katherine? A couple. There's a new film coming out about her. Oh, my son. That's Alex. Katherine was the African American woman born 2 years before the vote who calculated the trajectories for John Glenn, Alan Shepard, and the Apollo mission. And Tom Hanks, who won the Medal of Freedom this last Tuesday, was with Margaret Hamilton. Margaret Hamilton is the woman who if you look at her on their Wikipedia page, she's standing next to the code she wrote for all of the command modules and all the lunar landers of the entire Apollo mission and Skylab. And so they came out and he put out his arm, Tom Hanks, because Hanks and Hamilton were in a row. She took it and he said, if I had known about you, you would have been in the movie. And therein lies the problem and the opportunity. Because the lost history of technical women and people of color is very serious. And Churchill says the further back you can look, the farther forward you will see. And so knowing that women and men have together done all this extraordinary work is really important for all of us. And we think that it's one of the key things. It's just, last person I'll tell you about Catherine Wright of the Wright brothers. You see her in photos, but no one really knows that she's their COO. She is in the French Legion of Honor. And so let's surface the Wright family history of flight and all the stories that were there the whole time. So that will help us.
The Ambassador of Finland, Christy.
Thank you very much, and congratulations, you are doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
And thank you both for very interesting presentations. A question for Megan. You referred to the need for regulation in the digital world, but what would you say are the top 2 or 3 issues where we would actually need international regulation, international standards and international law? And for the judge, maybe in the interconnected world, I think the importance of international law is increasing. But do you see a change in the attitudes as far as the US approach to international law is concerned, do you see any sort of long-term trends there? Thank you.
So, there are many things, and I loved your description of the messiness of the conversation, because I think that so much of this is emerging right now, and so we are experiencing what it is that the rules should be, and sometimes people cross the line, and then we're like, oh, we don't want to be there, and we come back, and it's in this dialogue that we're finding our way together. Certainly the areas of privacy, the areas of not bullying each other online, keeping our principles and our values of free speech, but also our principles about how we treat each other. So important. The one that I think is really critical in terms of opportunity is net neutrality. A lot of people think it's a business debate somehow, but it's actually an architecture. It's a technical choice. It's a technical choice to have something that's an open thing so that everybody can innovate together and have an opportunity to be innovative together. And so as you look internationally at a country who might shut down the internet for their people or leave it open and might change those rules and create sort of fast lanes for those who pay more or others, I think these are really important fundamental principles about access that live in the architecture of those who invented the beginning of the internet. All the work around cybersecurity together, which is really an arms race of staying ahead of the inventiveness of those who would cause tremendous trouble. And again, diversity is very important there. Because the broader ideas, we know, all the research shows that the best ideas are made by the most diverse teams. The best bottom line, diversity is really a prosperity agenda that's misunderstood as only a social or an inclusion issue. It's both. And so we want to include everyone, and then we'll fix everything together, which is what I really believe in. And I think that finding our way, and as we cross the boundaries, where we don't want to go, rapidly getting into those conversations to come back to where we want to be and sticking with our core values is a big part of the conversation. And it's very international because it's in that international network.
Right. Sure does. This would be hard for you, harder for a European than for an American to understand what I'm about to say. I think it's becoming blurred, international law and law of other countries. All right? And I don't mind. I don't care. Now, you're at the political level, and you are talking to people who are in politics quite often. And you are worried about institutions, and political institutions, great. I say, that's not my job. My job is, in this area, is I want to give you some facts. And when you see the facts, well, there we are. Those are the problems.